Once upon a time, in the kingdom of Dilkash, there ruled a kind-hearted and noble king named Sultan Dawood. His people loved him so much that they were ready to give up their lives at just his command. But the king's whole world was his daughter, Princess Maria. Maria was as beautiful as a fairy and as gentle as a flower. The Sultan often smiled and said, "Maria, your laughter is the true sparkle of this palace." Little did he know, behind the walls of this very palace, his own brother Zubair was burning with hatred and greed. One deep and silent night, while the whole palace was fast asleep, Sultan Dawood suddenly fell very ill. He writhed in pain. When Maria rushed into his room, she saw that the Sultan's face had turned pale. With trembling hands, he grabbed Maria's hand but couldn't say a word. Zubair had cunningly silenced the royal doctor beforehand. Within moments, Sultan Dawood breathed his last in his daughter's arms. The palace was filled with wailing and grief, but in Zubair's eyes there wasn't sadness. There was a strange glint. The gleam of power. The very next day after the funeral, before the Sultan's mourning had even ended, Zubair declared himself king. "From now on, this crown is mine, and this palace is the symbol of my power." When Maria asked her uncle, "Uncle, what's happening?" his tone changed. He growled, "From now on, this crown is mine, and you're not a princess of this palace anymore, you're just a burden." That's when Maria realized her father's killer was none other than her own uncle. Before she could tell the people, Zubair ordered his soldiers to lock Maria up in the secret prison. The place where Maria was thrown didn't even get a single ray of sunlight. Cold water dripped down the walls, and the silence all around filled her heart with fear. Zubair had strictly ordered that Maria be given just enough food to keep her alive. But the food was so disgusting that Maria would cry just looking at it. She never even dreamed that the palace where she was raised with all the luxuries, she'd end up sleeping on the floor. She spent every night thinking about her father, crying and saying, "Dad, look what your brother has done to me." Days went by, and Maria's condition kept getting worse. But a spark of revenge started burning in her heart. She knew if she stayed here, she would die. One night, when the rain was pouring down hard and lightning was flashing, Maria noticed the old prison guard fast asleep, and his bunch of keys had fallen to the ground. Carefully, Maria stretched her hand through a hole in the wall, held her breath, and grabbed the keys. Her hands were shaking, but her courage was strong. She unlocked the door and quietly slipped out. Because of the rain, the palace guards were sluggish. Maria hid her face with old clothes, jumped over the back wall, and ran toward the forest. Her feet were wounded, thorns tearing through her clothes, but she didn't want to stop. Running as fast as she could, she ended up in a place where there wasn't a soul in sight. Just an old lake and an old hut by its shore, smoke rising from the chimney. Gathering all her courage, Maria took a step toward the hut, not even thinking about what might be waiting for her there. But as she got closer, her courage gave out and she fainted. When she opened her eyes, she found herself lying in a warm bed. In front of her was an old man with a white beard and deep wrinkles on his face, cooking something over the fire. Maria stepped back in fear, but the old man spoke gently. "Don't be afraid, child. You're safe here. What's your name? And what are you doing in this dangerous forest?" Crying, Maria told him everything, from Sultan Dawood's death to Zubair's tyranny. The elder's name was Baba Ramat. He used to be the top soldier of the Sultanate, the commander-in-chief, but fed up with the court's conspiracies, he had become a recluse here. After hearing Maria's words, he took a deep breath and said, "Daughter, crying won't get you any justice. If you want your grandfather's killer punished, you have to change yourself. You need to go from being a delicate princess to a strong warrior." A strange spark lit up in Maria's eyes. She decided she would never cry again. Baba Ramat gave Maria new clothes and started training her the very next day. In the beginning, even lifting a sword was tough for Maria. Her hands would get blisters, but whenever she got tired, she would remember the last face of her grandfather. Baba Ramat not only taught her how to wield a sword, but also taught her to understand the enemy's moves and to be patient. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. In the silence of the forest, a sword was being forged, one that would shake Zubair's throne. Time flew by, and before she knew it, 5 long years had passed. Those 5 years had completely changed. Maria, she was no longer the delicate princess who used to chase butterflies. Now she had become a fierce warrior whose sword's lightning would pierce the enemy's heart. Baba Remat had taught her every skill a great soldier needs. One day, Baba Remat placed his hand on her shoulder and said, "Daughter, today your training is complete. Your test begins now." Maria picked up her father's old sword, the one Baba Remat had carefully kept, and held it close to her chest. She covered her face with a dark veil so no one could recognize her. She prayed to Baba Remat and set off toward the kingdom of Dilkash. When she reached the city's border, she noticed the city had changed. Fear hung heavy in the air. People were sneaking around quietly, and at every corner stood Zubair's ruthless soldiers. The faces of the common folk showed nothing but hunger and terror. In the city market, a town crier was beating a drum. Maria listened closely. "Listen, listen. Sultan Zubair's son, Prince Azaria, is returning after years of secret training." Maria's blood boiled. He thought the cruel man's son would be just as ruthless. He decided this was the perfect chance to get into the palace. By attacking Prince Jariab's caravan, she would clear the way to Zubair. Prince Jariab's caravan was moving through a dense forest. Soldiers were beating drums and celebrating as they went. There was no joy on Jariab's face. He had heard tallies of his father's cruelty and his heart was heavy. Suddenly, an arrow sliced through the air and landed right by the horse at the front of the caravan. The caravan came to a halt. In the next moment, a dark-masked warrior leapt from the trees and stood right in front of them. Her sword gleamed in the sunlight. "Stop right there. The cruel man's son isn't allowed to pass." The soldier rushed at her, but Maria's sword skills were unbeatable. She moved like lightning. Within minutes, she took down Jariab's elite guards with ease. When Jariab saw this, he drew his sword, not to fight, but just to show off. Their swords clashed, sparks flying. "Who are you, and why are you attacking me?" Jariab asked. Maria glared at him angrily. "I am your end." She struck a powerful blow that threw Jariab off balance. But surprisingly, he didn't strike back. Instead, he lowered his sword and said, "If my death will help anyone, then go ahead and kill me. I can't carry the weight of my father's sins anymore." Maria's hands started trembling. She thought she was about to fight a monster, but the guy standing in front of her was drowning in his own pain. She saw the truth in Jariab's eyes and her sword stopped. Still, she steeled her heart. She tied up Jariab's hands and eyes, then dragged him to an old, mysterious house deep in the forest where she had made her hideout. When she took the blindfold off Jariab's eyes, he looked at this unknown warrior in shock. "Why do you want to kill me? What have I ever done to you?" Maria, furious, took off her mask. Seeing her beautiful but angry, flushed face, Jariab's breath caught. "You're Princess Maria?" Jariab asked quietly, stepping softly. "We used to play together as kids. I've been searching for you for years. I was told you changed." Maria pressed her sword against his neck and growled, "That's a lie. Your father poisoned my grandfather and locked me away so he could take the throne. You're the blood of that killer." Tears welled up in Jariab's eyes. "I always knew my grandfather was strict, but I never thought he was a murderer." He looked at Maria and said, "Maria, if this is true, then I don't deserve this crown. I'm not your enemy. I want to be your ally. Instead of seeking revenge on me, give me a chance to help you claim what's rightfully yours." For the first time, Maria paused to think, was this some trick by Jariab? Or was he really ready to stand up against his father? She decided to test him. Maria saw the truth in Jariab's eyes and slowly lowered her sword. "All right, Jariab, I believe you. But remember, if this is a trick, my sword knows the way to your heart." Jariab bowed his head in surrender and said, "Even my blood owes you, Maria. I must atone for what my father did." Together, they hatched a plan so bold that even Zubair couldn't have imagined it. Jariab revealed there was an old secret passage beneath the palace that opened right beside the court where Zubair was preparing to celebrate his next victory. Jariab dressed Maria in a servant's outfit and covered her face with a veil so she could easily get into the palace. When they reached the palace gates, there was heavy security all around. Zubair had spread fear throughout the entire kingdom after Maria's attack. Using her royal status, Jariab cleared a path and took Maria inside with her. The very walls of the palace where Maria had spent her childhood now felt strange and terrifying. From every corner, she could hear her father's laughter, now silent forever. They sneaked through secret passages and got really close to the court. From there, they heard Zubair's booming voice telling his ministers that Sharia was coming back. Now this kingdom is ours forever, and there shouldn't be any trace of that crazy Maria left. Maria's hand gripped the hilt of her sword tightly. Jariab took her hand and signaled to be patient for now. They were waiting for the right moment to reveal Zubair's true face in front of everyone, both the people and the court. The next day, the palace court was packed with people. Zubair sat proudly on his throne, wearing Sultan Dawood's crown, which he had grabbed through deceit. He announced, "Today my son Jariab has returned, and I hand over this kingdom to him." The crowd was silent. No joy, no hope on their faces, only fear. Jariab stepped forward, but instead of reaching for the crown, he looked into Zubair's eyes and said, "Dad, this crown belongs only to the one with a pure heart. Is your heart pure?" The court fell completely silent. Sweat started to form on Zubair's forehead. "What are you saying, Jariab? Have you lost your mind?" Jariab signaled, and Maria, who had been standing there all along disguised as a servant, stepped forward and pulled off her veil. The entire court erupted in noise. "Princess Maria, she's alive!" Zubair's face went pale. Maria drew her sword and said fiercely, "Zubair, you thought you could imprison me and bury me in the grave of death, but God's justice has brought you right before me." She then turned to the people and judges present in the court and told them the whole story that had happened 5 years ago. The poisoned cup, Sultan Dawood's final breaths, and the cruelty of the prison. Zubair shouted orders to his soldiers, "Take her down! She's lying." But to his shock, the soldiers didn't move an inch. Jariab had already told them the truth and won them over. Zubair was left all alone. His crown felt like a heavy burden on his head, and his own deceit stood right in front of him. When he saw even his soldiers had abandoned him, he flew into a rage bordering on madness. He raised his shield and drew Sultan Dawood's sword, the very one he'd snatched along with the throne. "If not me, then no one will rule this kingdom." He roared and lunged at Maria. The courtiers stepped back, and Maria skillfully blocked his attack. Their swords clashed and the whole court shook with the sound. Zubair was an old player, but Maria had Baba Ramet's training and the pain of her father's blood on her heart. The battle got fiercer. Jariab tried to move forward, but Maria signaled that this was her own fight. Zubair slyly tried to throw dust in Maria's eyes, but she quickly turned and struck his hand with her sword, making Sultan Dawood's sword slip from his grip and fall far away. Zubair collapsed. Maria's sword was at his neck. "Speak, tyrant. Aren't you ashamed of your crimes?" There was thunder in Maria's voice. Zubair begged for his life, crying, but the people standing in the court shouted, "Punish him! Give him death!" Maria raised her sword, but suddenly he remembered Baba Ramet's words that justice changes the world. He lowered his sword and said, "I'm not a killer. I'm giving the same punishment you gave me." He ordered the judges to lock Zubair up for life in the same dark prison where he had thrown Maria. The guards dragged Zubair out, humiliated, from the court. The whole kingdom echoed with cheers of "Long live Princess Maria." After Zubair was gone, the air in the kingdom finally felt calm and peaceful after so many years. The next morning, with the first ray of the sun, preparations for Maria's coronation began. This time, the palace was decorated with flowers, and instead of fear, people's faces showed genuine smiles. Maria wore the same old dress her father had picked out for her. When she entered the court, Jaria stepped forward and lifted the crown that her father had wrongfully taken. With great respect, Jaria placed the crown on Maria's head and said, "From today, you're not just the queen of this kingdom, but the queen of our hearts." After putting on the crown, Maria addressed the people. "I've learned that revenge doesn't bring peace to the heart. Justice lights up the world. I promise that from now on, no daughter in this kingdom will be left helpless, and no father will be wronged." The whole court erupted with applause and prayers. Maria looked at Jaria, who had not only stood by her, but also stood up against his own father to stand for the truth. Maria took Jariab's hand and declared him her trusted advisor and partner in life. Baba Ramat was also respectfully invited to the palace. Seeing him, tears welled up in Maria's eyes. The kingdom of Dilkash was now happier than ever before. Together, Maria and Jaryab ended the old enmity for good and created a love story that would be remembered for centuries. The girl who once cried alone in a dark prison had now laid the foundation of a hopeful new world. After all the pain and trials, happiness had finally returned to their lives for good.